And now we welcome Kieron Dodd, who, as I said earlier, stepped in at the last minute. He's sales director of Great British Chefs. He joined last year, having, I discovered tonight, headed up the commercial side of the Times and the Sunday Times magazines, and has notched up several years at the Telegraph, running the travel team. I think I heard various journalists moaning about you over the years. Ads and editorial, not a marriage made in heaven. But now he's at Great British Chefs, showcasing over 100 of Britain's greatest chefs. They've got a website, some of you may well know it. It's got over 3,000 recipes, one of which I have cooked quite well, thank you, and has over 1.3 social media followers. Social media. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'll reset my app.
Thank you. So, food and travel, two of the great pillars, I would say, of a great life. In fact, a lot of people would argue the only two things that matter in life. So you may say, well, how does it all work together? I don't think they're actually two separate things, first of all, just to set a bit of context. Particularly, as Alison said, I've spent a lot of time in travel and moved recently to food. Obviously, my two passions in life, you sort of get the theme there. But they are absolutely, we don't see them as a dichotomy. I think there are, basically, if you talk to anyone about their holidays and you time them unprompted to see when they talk about food first, I would bet anyone in this room they couldn't get to a minute. Okay, so for me, it's a very interesting place to be and a transition. And I'll explain a little bit about what we do. But the reason I want to share it with you today is that we feel passionately that food is basically the gateway to a lot of travel and experience. And for everyone promoting travel, food is obviously something that could be a great way to get into it. Not least because it's the new rock and roll. I mean, everyone knows now that chefs, more chefs than they ever have done, they know about food programs. We're endlessly bombarded with the Great British Bake Off, constant MasterChef stuff. So you'd have to have lived in a cupboard for years to not have spotted the fact that food has become a real currency at the moment. And I think this is something important to tap into, given that the close links between food and travel. So just to step back a little bit to explain and enlarge very quickly on what we do, because you may say, Great British Chefs, what does that mean? Because most of you probably haven't been to our site. What we are, and I have to thank Sam for this, because there's a great introduction about content. That is what we do. We basically we work with 130 of Britain's biggest chefs, very briefly. They're mostly Michelin starred, from your Marcus Swearings, your Nathan Outlaws, right down to people you don't know. But they all cook, and they're passionate about their cooking. That's what makes us different. But the key thing is, the interesting bit here, and I'll come back to this a little bit, which totally agrees with what Sam said, is yes, we get a lot of monthly visitors, but we get more people engaged with social media. So the first point to take away in terms of what you do in any communication nowadays, and I make it the point with us, but trust me, we're not alone. Everyone's there. Whatever you do, think about the social side of it, and I'll come back to that. What we do, though, is content. So we do content all around food. We're also passionate about Great Britain. A lot of people think chefs are all London-based, it's all a big sort of, thing, and everything outside the M25, you sort of fall off some weird sort of part of the world where food disappears in terms of inequality. So what we do is really, really passionately champion the fact that actually nowadays food is all over Britain. And I think this is one of the areas where we really need to think hard about, because I think personally, and we found, from our search terms and the traffic we get, that people are interested in food all over the UK. Now, this gives us huge opportunity. I mean, if you think of where these chefs come from, if you plan a holiday in Cornwall, why not talk about the food there? It is Wales, Scotland. There are huge numbers of chefs all around the country working hard to promote their local food and their local destinations. And so I think it's a complete waste of opportunity not to talk about all the great food. And we're not just talking about going to Michelin-starred restaurants, because let's face it, most people travel to places and they don't go to them. They may watch them on telly, but we know that they don't go to them in numbers. What we're really talking about is more of a changing of attitude to say that there are great food markets, there are great produce, local produce in anywhere you travel in the UK. Now, whether we're promoting that to inbound, which is, I know, more of a challenge, and I was talking to Richard earlier on about that, definitely more of a challenge for inbound, but I'm thinking more for people within Britain and travelling around Britain. So all of us should think about that. Outside the UK, just to give you another flavour, so we've launched something called Great Italian Chefs, just very briefly. Exactly the same idea. Now, the reason we did this is because loads of people are looking for Italian food. Okay? Obviously, you doesn't need a genius to work out where we might go next in terms of types of food. But this is all about, again, Italy is such a big destination for food. Where could be the next one? Where could you think of places around the world, from as close as France to Thailand, should be, if you're promoting those destinations, should it not be through a food conversation as much as anything? And I'll come to some figures later on about how people make their decisions on where to go. I use this one. This is a rather boring one. And by the way, I promise I didn't mention, I've got no graphs. Okay, I do apologise for that, given earlier on, but I haven't. But I make this. Again, this is, there are some headline stats here, but these are the ones I want you to concentrate on a little bit here. Organic search. Whatever you do in your marketing now, and conversation, think about this. We get most of our traffic from organic search, and most people should nowadays. If you've got good content, you should be able to get people to your sites, and therein lies the problem. The biggest challenge I've found talking to most travel companies is that they've got some quite good content, but they can't get people to it, okay? Or they've got a great site, a transactional site, but there's not great content with it. What you need to do, the challenge for any site, is to get people to see good content. I don't have all the answers, as to how to do that, and I'm not saying it's necessarily with us, but I'm saying think about that, because I have so many conversations with people that said, yeah, I've got some brilliant content on my site. And my first question is, well, yeah, but how much is it seen? Because it seems to me there's a lot of content creation going on, which is absolutely the name of the game, going back to Sam's point. But the other part of the equation is, how do you get people there? So you've got to make it relevant, interesting. Now, whether that's breaking out of just telling someone about a destination or a holiday and bringing something else relevant to it, that's the challenge for you. Because if you just do, like you're saying, the B2C thing, where you're just shouting at people, you won't get people to read your content. They won't find it. If you break out of that and have a conversation, it might be about food, it might be something else, it might be about adventure, it might be about activities, but have some sort of conversation that makes it relevant. Mobile was the other thing. It was mentioned earlier on. Mobile traffic is huge for us. Whatever you do, I think the point's already been made. You've got to think mobile. Just if that's one thing you take out of today, as sure it's been said before. The other one, social media's been mentioned before. This is an area for travel that I think is really interesting. We have the biggest social media of all that 1.3 million I mentioned earlier on, 613,000 people on Pinterest. There are two areas where Pinterest does really well because it's sharing pictures, travel, and food. Okay, so whatever you do, don't miss out on Pinterest. 3 points I want to leave you with before we get into questions. This was a survey we did in October, thinking about next year. What do people talk about at dinner parties? Travel, obviously, but food is number one. So again, think about how you can marry these two things together. That's what people talk about. And it will increase. It will continue. The way the trend is at the moment with food, it will increase. How do they decide where to eat? This is on holiday, by the way. Recommendations, personal recommendations. This is the C2B conversation again. This is all about advocacy and people talking to each other. Most of it's done online. Okay, so think about, how do I get people to become an advocate of my holiday or destination? And that will increase next year. And lastly, this is one we asked them, what's your key decision maker? What do you consider? What's the key driver of your holiday, sorry? Weather, unashamedly, for people in the UK. I think we're all pretty much in agreement there. Hotel facilities, makes sense. But interestingly, and this is the one that's increasing all the time, and we think this will go up and up and up. These two, quality of local restaurants and national cuisine. This is not about fancy restaurants. This is about going to a country with great experience. We've got a lot of talk of things like farm to fork at the moment. You can go to Canada, catch a fish, go on a trip, cook it, eat it that evening. It's that sort of trip that's going to be massive this year, we think. It's going to be going out, foraging things and then cooking them. There are more and more companies that are offering this, and even if they don't do it as a special trip, we think that's going to be pretty big. So you're bringing experiential stuff, which has been talked about a lot over the last few years, into the realms of food. So again, it's bringing a little bit of food into your holiday. And that's my 10 minutes. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much. Greg assures me there will be nibbles at the networking. Whether they're good enough to bother to tweet about them, we'll see. Thank you very much, Kieron. Whilst the mic exchanges, let me introduce, last but by no means least, Max Clapham. Max is a director of BDRC Continental, where he heads up their travel, tourism and leisure team. He's been there since 2008, and he provides, I have to read this, insight in market sizing, segmentation, pricing and membership. He's helped many in the sector optimize service propositions to drive their commercial, social, operational and communications goal. We'll find out what that means. It's all over to you. Thank you.
Fascinating. It really does. Well, first of all, many thanks for having me here today. I'm just here pretty much to share some, I suppose, what I call collected thoughts regarding wellness tourism, and perhaps some of the possible kind of like who, what, kind of like where trends to look out for in the coming year. Now, you can look at me, and I'm certainly not what you'd consider a poster boy for the wellness agenda. But what I can say is that BDRC, as a company, have been asked to research the market a little here in the UK, and we've also actually began to track wellness through our annual holiday trends report. Now that annual holiday trends report, which often gets talked about this time of the year, is not yet out till next month. But what I have done is skimmed off just a little bit of the stuff to do with wellness tourism to share with you today, along with some other observations. And if I actually press the button, I actually might have actually got onto my presentation. Yay! Okay, cool. Right, so wellness tourism. Just a very quick refresh about what we actually define as wellness tourism here today. A term itself which is open to an awful lot of scrutiny and interpretation. Wikipedia is a first port of call for it. But actually looking down, you've got the Global Wellness Institute, probably the daddies of the wellness agenda, even if they do tend to arrive at things through a very US-centric lens. But they divide the market into two, the primary and secondary purpose wellness tourism. And then there's our own little definition at BDRC at the bottom, which we use in our surveys and in work we've done for the National Coastal Tourism Academy. And that is trips whose primary purpose is to take part in activities and or use facilities to specifically enhance your health and well-being. So that's what we're talking about. Now, economists tend to agree it's a sector growing significantly faster than global tourism overall. And the size of the market, often bandied around, is around about 315 billion. And these are figures from 2013, actually commissioned by the industry over in the US. But they estimated that it then accounted for about 14% of all tourism spending, if only about 6% of all tourism trips. Now, I suppose what I'm wanting to do is looking at getting to the heart of what wellness and tourism is all about. There was a 2015 Global Wellness Summer that took place in Mexico City last November. A trip I regret I actually couldn't whack article, but they pinpointed what they thought lies at the heart of wellness tourism, and this is the transformational experience. And that actually ties in with a lot of work we've been doing, focusing on the proactive self-development outputs in travel experiences. And it is this that will actually remain the category growth driver going forward. And actually, I think it was what I'm getting around to saying is consequently position wellness travel much more in the mainstream. So, what are the trends? Okay. First, let's actually look at some of that fresh data that I touched on participation and who in the UK are going on primary purpose wellness holidays of at least 4 nights. On the left over there, you'll see that there has been some growth, up from overall from 18% to 19% of us taking at least one primary purpose wellness holiday. Now, overall, if you look on the right, you'll actually see more of us are actually dipping our toes in the water as well. Just 58% of us now never having taken such a holiday. And what we have found is exactly the same pattern when we look at the short break market as well. I think critically what the left-hand graph really reveals is that there's actually a higher proportion of men now taking regular wellness holidays than women. And I suppose if for those of you who have been on wellness breaks and scouring around your wellness holiday literature at this time of year, you'll probably see men very underrepresented in this market and in marketing. And I think it's something destinations need to look at a lot more to try and cultivate men as well. So despite what might seem like a slight falling back in the older market, what is clear, and I think this is crucial, is that whilst the wellness market is strongly driven by the youth, it can be for everyone. It showed up there, it's for all social classes. And that's what the mainstream market really needs to better engage with, we reckon, this year. Okay. So, top trends what? This is where I will go a little bit hazy. And refer to an organisation called Spa-Finder Wellness 365. And they've been releasing top 10 wellness trends reports for many years. But before I actually show their 2016 musings, I thought it'd be just worthwhile to take a look back at what they predicted 5 years ago would be the wellness trends and to see actually how many of them really took off. So there's some classics. Some like wellness and brands we have seen take off. In the hotel sector, you've got like IHG with their Even brand, Starwoods with their West End wellness movement, and I'd say arguably over here, even here in the UK, Centre Park potentially reimagining itself as kind of like more of a wellness brand, even complete with its own like Aqua Sana range. And then there's the fads up there 5 years ago, like Extreme Beauty. I think this is kind of the use of bee venom and bird poo and snail mucus to get rid of lines and warts. And I'm not sure about that, if that's really taken off, but what do I know? But and then if we look at last year's trends, another little list here. Now, I would wager that some we could be equally sharing today as 2016 trends, and others where probably the jury is definitely still out as to whether they really did make it. So what wellness to look out for this year? Here we go. Adrenaline Zen cocktails, cruising, festivals, Korean skincare, on-demand services, parenting, sex, surfing, temazcal, which apparently is from Mexico, I don't know, and workplace. So those are your top 10 wellness trends. But there's another list, and this time it's from those good people at the Health and Fitness Travel. And I think now if you take a quick scan of what appears on both lists, it would appear that sex and fertility wellness, this kind of like adrenaline, zen, active meditation, I'm an expert in that, and wellness connected to the workplace are actually going to be the common trends for this year that could really be making waves. So as much as I would love to share my views on each, I won't, But I will leave it to you to judge which you think are potentially the 5-minute fads and which truly do have legs for the future. But I do recommend both sources are fascinating little reads if you want the detail of what each of those things are for. But I think for this short presentation, what I wanted to point out is that it's actually this pairing of wellness with pretty much everything that is the trend. I think it's very much reflective of how we as a society increasingly seek wellness, perhaps in all the things that we do. So I've looked at the who, I've looked at the what, can only be the where. Now I do have my little notes here. Finally, what are the destinations to watch out for in 2016? And they're expected to be more promptly. Now this, again, last year, I'm relying on the very good team at the Telegraph, who were touting this. However, the Telegraph haven't actually committed anything to paper yet this year. So in the spirit of using the trends of the day, I'm using the combined wisdom of the Daily Mail and Airbnb, who are giving us this list of the top 10 places for 2016. I'm sure you'll agree, some beautiful places included here, including some here in the UK. But I think it's actually only really Italy, internationally, that's actually making a recurring appearance, albeit with completely different wellness pairings, such as wellness and biotology, wellness and cookery schools, and over there on the right, wellness and forest chalets. So obviously, I think what I'm talking about is when wellness tourism was originally first talked about, it conjured up very much Asian destinations came to mind. India, Thailand, up in the Himalayas. Basically, it's great to see that there are other places being talked about. But what I'm trying to get at here is it emphasizes, oh bloody hell, 1 minute. It emphasizes that wellness travel is potentially less about the destination and actually more about how the experience alters a person's well-being. And that's mind, body, and soul. And I think that, again, is the ongoing trend. On which point, I must point out one other very crucial travel trend destination for 2016. And this is actually courtesy of the Claphams. And it is a yoga retreat in Gambia, set up by my brother, which is combined with local community-led people and place initiatives. So just opening now. So if there's anybody who's a yoga teacher or knows of a yoga teacher, come up and I'll give you a full sales pitch afterwards. But there we are. So that's another personal trend we see developing for 2016. But what I'd also like to point out, and I'm sorry if I'm going a little bit over, is that our survey of British holidaymakers that we did, we asked them what they flagged up as the top 5 English destinations that they would consider for a wellness holiday. And as you can see, this is topped out by the Lake District, with more than half of people really considering it as a wellness destination going forward. So I would have also liked to include Cornwall in there, which actually we looked at in the survey a lot more granularly, which is why it hasn't appeared as a net. So when people ask where in 2016 for wellness travel, again, it's pretty much everywhere. But what is key is the natural setting of the place, which most of those places alluded to. And this point came clearly through when we actually asked people in our survey what was most important to them when considering any kind of wellness break. And this factor was actually twice as important as the second most important driver, namely spa facilities and treatments. Because I've got limited time, I'm going to avoid that little graph, but it's very pretty, and it tells you that wellness tourists aren't the only people doing wellness activities. You probably knew that. I'll go straight to what I really wanted to bring it round to is how, I think a key trend for this is how the penny is really dropping for UK destinations. We're probably all very familiar with the efforts places like the Tyrol in Austria, Rotorua in New Zealand have done to really brand themselves as wellness destinations and been very successful. But the penny is dropping, and I think domestic destinations are seeing this year that they can really promote themselves as centres for wellness tourism this year and into the future. And some of the reasons for why. Just a quick reminder, premium opportunity with shoulder season potential. It's, you know, puts a like-for-like premium. People spend more on wellness. We've got great natural settings, a bit of peace and quiet, and wellness can really help domestic destinations capture a greater share of the market outside these peak summer months. Another call for wellness. I think although wellness tourists do more on holiday, wellness activities are not the preserve of wellness tourists by any means. So basically what British Destination will do is attracting new business from primary wellness visitors at the same time as enhancing overall market proposition. A few more points. I think there's always been this fear in the past that promoting wellness kind of deters other visitors, but the evidence really doesn't seem to support this. There is growth in practices such as yoga in the UK, and there's a willingness in society to engage a lot more with wellness issues. And I think this self-development acknowledges a key to holiday experiences. When we looked at what drove great holiday experiences for the NCTA, and we're not just talking about great wellness holidays, we're talking about great holidays per se, it was actually self-development, and this is the ability for travel to help us as visitors connect with, reinvent ourselves, gain a sense of achievement, and enrich our mind. That really correlated strongest with the highest ratings for holiday satisfaction, propensity to recommend, and propensity to revisit. And I think that is something that the wellness transformational experience type trend feeds perfectly into. And the final bit why we should be promoting it is there are clear local community and health benefits. There's a strong public health debate in this country and recognition that developing a wellness infrastructure is not just a siren for tourists. It's a way of getting communities fitter and better again, and it also means there are potential additional sources of funding for wellness promotion. So, in conclusion, we reckon that with an emerging societal shift towards wellness, influenced both by the media and public health policy, consumers will increasingly look for wellness outputs this year in their holiday decision-making plans. And I'm leaving you with this summarising quotes from the Wellness Summit last year from the president of Servitel Corp, who's a specialist in tourism and recreational real estate, and one that may encapsulate what I think is a real trend for the years ahead. Wellness to become a bigger player in the destination resort space, while resorts without wellness and purpose will decline, which is quite an interesting thought. So there we are, and I'm sorry I went over.
That's all right.
Thanks.